That's right, everyone. What is going on? Good morning. Happy Saturday. I hope everybody's doing well. This is Bridging the Gap. As always, I'm AJ Malillo.
I am Steve Rambola.
And you can check us out on Jersey First TV. That's Jersey First TV on YouTube, jerseyfirsttv.org or jerseyfirst.org. And then click the TV little tab, and you could see us bridging the gap. You could see the Nader narrative. You could see Real Talk with Fernando. All of the shows. You could sign up for our newsletter. You can sign the pledge. You can do it all. Subscribe to Jersey First TV on YouTube and wherever else you're watching. Subscribe to Jersey First TV on Spotify if you're listening. Yeah, there you go. That's the whole little thing. Um, if you're listening here or watching here, I have one strand of hair that's been annoying me all morning. So just ignore it because it's really been bothering me. I tried to do water. I tried to use everything. My fingers. I forgot to comb it this morning, so that's why it's being real annoying. So just please bear with me.
It's now that you mentioned it, I wasn't looking at it. It's the only thing that I
It's
can
your
look
only
at.
thing you're gonna look at now. I know. It's
Yeah,
just, I don't know what's going on.
that's okay. He's still handsome.
Oh, thank you. Steven, how are you? You had an interesting week. You were down in the great Sunshine State. How
I
was that?
was. I was. It was different. Uh, um, I went down there, did a whole bunch of stuff. I spent a few nights on a Navy base, which was a totally new experience for me. Military life, absolutely out of this world, realm of possibility of like understanding for me until I saw how it all worked. It was crazy. Met some really cool people though, and did some cool stuff on base. I actually got to fly the military flight simulator that they teach all of the like marine aviation people before they get in the planes, which
Cool.
was really cool. So if you need somebody to take off and fly a plane for you, I'm your guy.
Virtually, of course.
Somebody would just have to swap for landing because I cannot land a plane, as it turns out. This is a very hard thing to do. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun and stopped down toward a law school that I've been accepted to while I was down there, which was really awesome. Very excited. Love the area, love the program. They were on spring break, so there wasn't too many students on campus. There was still some of the ones that were practicing for trial team and just studying up. Some kids were getting ready for the bar coming up soon, so all very exciting stuff. Definitely right now missing the weather. I want to say it was an average of like 80 degrees for the entire time I was down there. And I stepped out of the Atlantic City airport the other night to a brisk like 30 degrees with wind. And it only affirms the position that maybe I should be going to law school somewhere warm.
I feel like even in the summer, when you step out of the plane coming back from Florida, you're like, why is it so cold?
Yes, it's a different kind of heat down there. It's so warm. I feel, you know what? It's called the Sunshine State. I think it's because when you step foot into Florida, the sun just wraps its arms around you and it's like a warm hug the whole time you're there.
Sure. I can see it, and except for when it's raining. But even when it's raining, like you're kind of like, this is nice too.
Yeah, it's pleasant.
Yeah,
So,
that's fair.
but you also did some traveling this week.
Yeah. I drove down to North Carolina, saw mom and dad. That was really nice. Just kind of hanging out. Got some things done down there. Got new glasses.
Ooh.
Got a new toothbrush. No big deal
Woo!
or anything. Walked the dog a
Woo!
little bit. It was a good time. It was nice. It was nice down there. Although it was warm. I was only there a couple days. It was warm. I'd say Tuesday, and then Wednesday it was chilly again. So I don't know. It was a little bit bipolar weather
Yeah.
wise, but what are you gonna do?
Still better than the Northeast.
Yeah, it was colder. It's definitely colder up here than it is down there. Like it was like 50 degrees, and that was a little chilly, but now it's like 30 degrees up in the
Yeah.
Northeast. So I'll
Yeah.
take 50 any day over 30.
I'm with you on that one.
But so last week was last week was our book club little episode. So
Yes.
what is your book for this month?
So
Going
my
in.
book I have it with me for the month of March. It's called The Death of Expertise: The Campaign Against Established Knowledge and Why It Matters by a gentleman named Tom Nichols. This book was written, I believe it came out, this one in 2020. Yeah, this one is 2019. So a little bit dated, which normally I wouldn't mind, but I know a lot of the information that's being talked about in here is has to deal with basically the internet giving people this false sense, he argues, of knowledge, where you can go online, you could spend 10 minutes on Wikipedia and think you know more than somebody that spent, 10 years in academia on that topic. And it's really interesting because he's beginning to talk about why access to this kind of information sort of gives people this false sense of knowledge superiority, and how it really takes away from people who are actually experts and creates a whole culture of disinformation and, falsely held beliefs across so many topics and areas of anything you can possibly learn about. So, really interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of really important crossover that I can make and connect some dots to how things have been developing since the book's been published. So, very, very interesting. And I'm enjoying it so far.
Yeah, for sure. That does sound very interesting. I think that it's going to be an interesting book to read in the wake of COVID, especially with what we're
Yes.
finding out now with our expert class, which I feel like is rightfully so being called into question. So,
Yes. I agree.
the book that I chose for this month, I don't have the physical copy with me. It's at home, but it's Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, which was written in 1953, and it's a dystopian novel talking about an American society where books have been outlawed and are to be burned if they are found. It's a There's a movie, it's a book, it's a classic. 451 degrees Fahrenheit, if you don't know, Stephen, is the temperature at which paper burns. So that's why it's called that. Um,
Yes.
and the firemen in this dystopian start the fires. They don't necessarily put them out. They burn the books. They don't stop the burning. Um,
I'm
so
interested to hear because
so
this is
yeah,
this is one of those books that I've always known about, but I've never read, never saw the movie when they made it recently. So
for sure. I think it's going to be interesting, and it continues my little like dystopian future travels. I read Brave New World at the beginning of last year, or I'm sorry, beginning or last month, right? I read 1984 at the beginning of last year, and now I'm reading Fahrenheit 451. So
yeah, you're just all sunshine and rainbows over there.
a little dystopian futures never hurt anybody except for all the people that they hurt. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a little totalitarian government, you know, it's it's just the fears of the Cold War, right?
Yeah, which is interesting. Again,
They, again, and
getting
they're saying that we might be entering another Cold War with China. So I think it's a good time to freshen up a little bit,
yeah, get yourself ready. Cold War
just in
2.0.
case, just in case. Um,
Oh,
but Stephen, let's move on to our story for the day, which directly has affected the community in which you live.
yes,
Um, and your father, I saw pictures of him all over the internet because it
yeah,
directly affected him. And that
yeah.
is the story with these whales washing ashore on the Jersey Shore, but not just in New Jersey, also in New York. And I know that there's stories of some whales being washed up in North or South Carolina. Let me just double check.
I
North
believe it was North.
Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina as well. Um, and Virginia. And so basically, what's going on here? There have been 25 whales that have washed ashore since December 1st. Um, and the National Oceanic and
Atmospheric.
Atmospheric Association, is that right? Or an administration? The NOAA, we'll just go with NOAA.
Yeah,
It's administration. Um, basically was able to do 13 necropsies, which is just an autopsy for animals. And they've discovered of those 13 that they were able to look into, 8 of them, the leading cause of death is that ships have hit them, which caused them to face injuries, leading to the deaths. Now, according to NOAA, they're saying that it's likely the reason for these whales to be hit is because, first of all, there's more of them. The populations have been growing, and the type of fish that they're most likely to feed on, they're saying, has been coming more and more inshore, and that's leading these whales to come closer to the shore, which is leading to more accidents and boating accidents. Others have been saying that maybe the reason that these whales are uh, dying is because they're getting into these shallower waters due to the uh, the plans of offshore windmills, which are basically uh, they're doing all of these testing procedures, and they're saying it's messing with the whales' sonar abilities and causing them to wash ashore. Um, there's a lot of questions here and not a lot of answers. It seems like there's a catch-all answer from NOAA and these other government agencies, which is just climate change. Climate change is causing all of these problems, and they're not really giving many concrete answers as to why or what exactly that climate change that is changing, which is causing these problems to manifest.
Yeah.
And I think another big thing is this idea of, in all of these places, there's a common thread, which is these offshore windmills. They're going out into North Carolina, they're going out off of the shores of New York, and they're going out off of the shores of New Jersey, which happens to be where most of these whales are washing ashore. It seems like there's a common denominator. Of course, as they say, um, you know, correlation doesn't equal causation, but it seems to be a heavy denominator there, a heavy common denominator there.
Yeah. I think there's so many. So I was talking about this last night actually with some of our mutual friends, and I thought there was an interesting point brought up that I'll mention here just because I think it's an opinion that a lot of people might have, right? So I want to say, first of all, the issue of whales washing up and offshore wind farms are so new in like the database of issues that people can have opinions on. It's not something I've known about the wind farms for quite some time, but not something that I've ever really sat down and like thought about having a concrete opinion on. And whales washing up again, until one washed up, a few blocks over, and my dad was there with the heavy machinery cutting it up. Not something that I really thought I needed to have an opinion on. So I think a lot of people are just making snap judgments on these, and I think it's important that we have conversations like this. But one of our friends had said that the people who claim that it's due to the offshore wind farms, that it's really just deep-seated propaganda against clean energy, and that it's anti-climate change, progressive people who are saying this, which I think is so interesting when you contrast that with what you just shared about NOAA, who said the reason that they are dying is climate change, right? So it's not the offshore wind climate change, it's just regular old climate change. So I think that contradiction is really an interesting place to sort of explore and think about how those two interact, and is it really anti-climate change activism when we don't know? Because like you said, they've done ships were the cause of at least 8 of the 13 that they were able to test out of the 25 that have washed up. Because my understanding is there's a certain point in the, I'm going to say, like, decaying period of these deceased animals where the tests that they would perform would no longer be productive, And that's the case for most of these, since they've only been able to test 13 of them. So we don't really have much affirmative data on half of these whales. So I think it's okay to sit in a space and have this kind of conversation where we say, we really don't know what the circumstances are. We know that at least 8 of 25 total that have washed up are due to ship strikes. That might be a high number, and that's totally fine to talk about. But then when you consider the totality of circumstances, I don't think it's implausible to rule out the fact that it could be these wind farms because we simply don't know.
Well, so I would say that the thing about the wind farms is that they're not even up and functioning yet, right? We're still doing all of the tracking underneath them. And so I think that the bigger thing is what is bringing these fish closer to the shore, what is bringing, which they're saying is bringing the whales closer to shore, which is going to lead them to be struck by more boats. And
Yes.
maybe, just maybe, I'm not a scientist. I'm in law school. I didn't follow a biology path or any sort of science path. So I could be completely off base here. Take this with a grain of salt. But is it at all possible that the reason that the fish are coming to closer to shore is because of this sonar technology that we're putting beneath the surface of the ocean? Like, do we know that the reason is climate change? Well, we are changing their environment by putting different sounds and different things into it in the name of clean energy. Absolutely. And look, is clean energy a fight that I think is worth fighting? Absolutely. Is this the best way to do it? I think a lot of people were against these windmills because they're an eyesore. One of the biggest calling cards of the state of New Jersey as our beaches, and you're going to stick these windmills out in the middle of the ocean, and it's going to look ugly, and so on and so forth. And fine, like that's all well and good for an argument, but at the end of the day, it's if you're actively causing a detriment to these populations of whales. I know that we're just talking mostly about humpbacks, but there was another article detailing that the North Atlantic right whales are also being, you know, affected in these whale deaths, and there's only 350 of them left in the wild, right? So if you are affecting these animal populations, which you are claiming to try and help and save through the wind farms, then what are you really doing here? It seems kind of counterproductive when there are other more efficient ways of green energy that we knowingly have available.
Yeah. And to that point, I was just reading an article that detailed some of the results of the necropsies that were conducted. And in where was this? February 27th, there was an 8 foot long bottlenose dolphin that had washed up in Cape May County. So it's not even just whales at this point. It is marine mammals, I think would be safe to say. So it is such a perplexing issue. And I think it's so unfortunate that we're kind of, sort of funneled into this position where no matter what side you take, there's really no winning. And I think it's unfortunate because we should have the ability to explore these green energy alternatives. And we should also have this concern for the marine life and, the things that give us a vivacious ecosystem off our coast, which is so important to literally everything that happens on shore. And I don't know. I at this point would agree with the majority of these mayors who have been sending letters to Governor Murphy who say, let's just stop, put a pause on it, get our footing, understand why this is happening because it is abnormal. I've lived down the road from the beach my whole life. I've never remembered or seen a whale wash up, let alone 8 of them in one go. You know what I mean? So it is something to cause concern about. And not for nothing, how does it make the people on these beach communities feel? I know last time we had talked about this, there was the following week a huge protest out in Point Pleasant, which gathered a lot of people. The community is not okay with how things are going here. And I would be willing to say that we would much rather find better clean energy alternatives than have these issues happening, because in a way they are traumatic for the community to know that this beautiful graceful creature, which sort of coexisting in the same space as us, is dying and washing up on our shores. There was one lady who wrote for NewJersey.com who said, I want to get her wording right. This is from Natalie Patterson from NJ.com. She wrote, "At times it feels like we're having a political debate at a funeral." And I think we just kind of, as New Jerseyans, need to get a grip, get our footing, allow proper time for research to be done on all of the possibilities, green energy, and what is causing these deaths, so we can move forward with productive conversation. Because, like I said, the discussion right now is basically a bunch of finger pointing and people trying to claim some righteous moral high ground on the issue of climate change. You're either for the energy or for the animal. And why can't we pause and try and meet in the middle at both? Because I think both of them are important.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that from the beginning, the offshore wind was going to be met with animosity.
Yeah.
And this is, if for the, I'll say, side of, I would imagine, the Murphy administration, like, this is just another obstacle that's like trying to get in the way of these offshore wind mills. But you know what? At the end of the day, you're the executive that was elected by the people of New Jersey. And the people of New Jersey, I think, are pretty much unified in the fact that we should figure out what's going on with these whales first.
Yes.
Like, this is the issue in the immediate. And right now, you know, every week it seems like there's another humpback whale washing up on the Jersey Shore,
Yep.
which has never been the case, like you mentioned. And so this is different. This is peculiar, and something has changed. And what's the first thing that we've noticed? That since you've started your preparation for these offshore windmills, what's the thing that's changed? More whales are dying. And maybe there's no connection there, but it seems like there's pretty strong circumstantial evidence. Like I said, I am not a biologist. I have really very little in the way of knowledge on this. I'm reading statistics from news organizations, but what I am doing is training to become a lawyer. And this seems like there's a case building against these offshore windmills, and I think it's something that should be investigated further and not just told you're crazy, there's nothing there. Because we've been told we're crazy before, Stephen, by these quote unquote experts. And it seems like time and time again, at least in the last 3 years, those that have been crazy, well, they were no longer crazy 6 months later.
Yeah, there is some sort of indication that comes down the pipeline. I think on a point of like personal experience, one thing that I find interesting after the hurricane, now almost 11 years ago, there was so much work being done offshore, right, literally up the street from me, by the Army Corps of Engineers, where they were doing these really extensive and extreme operations to take these giant barges and dredges and these ships, and they literally rebuilt our coastline. And as that was happening, there wasn't many dead whales washing up. I don't believe they were using sonar to shoot sand up into a boat through a pipeline and out to the beach, So even in the past, when I've literally been here to see and watch this kind of thing happen, with different technology, these issues weren't there. So to your point, I would add that as experience that's relevant and important to this case that is building against these offshore wind farms. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that maybe the silence from the Murphy administration is louder now than ever, because we had just talked about a few weeks ago that he's pushing forward the timeline on his green energy master plan to make New Jersey 100% renewable energy independent. And I think it was something like he wants 40% of our energy to come from these offshore wind farms and generate these like kilowattages of power from these things. And it would kind of put a pause on that really aggressive plan that he's putting together to try and reclaim his title of the most green governor in the country, if we had to stop that.
That's a great point, and it would more than put a pause on it. It might completely eradicate it, especially if the research comes out that says, "Hey, maybe this is the reason that the whales are dying." So why would you want that research to get out if you want to run for president in 2024, and run on a platform of "Look at me, I'm Mr. Green"?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of competing interests involved here. And again, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention that very fact. And you would obviously, in La La Land, hope that, the governor would take the time and say, hey, I hear you guys. This is affecting communities up and down the coast of my state where I'm trying to do this. We're going to respect you because this is your place, and we're going to pause this. But that's La La Land.
Well, true, and I think my last point to that is, yeah, you would hope that the guy who is governor he won his second term, so who will be in the governor's mansion for 8 years, would respect the people that have lived in the same communities for 20, 30, 40 years a little bit more than he does. But quite frankly, like you said, he's just more about the inflation of his own ego, inflation of his padding his stats, so to speak, and saying, "Hey, sucks, but I want to be the greenest governor in the state, even if it's at the expense of the whale population on the Atlantic coast."
And not for nothing, if that's the case, I would invite Governor Murphy to come spend more time at the governor's mansion on Island Beach State Park, which is a few blocks away from where the most recent whale washed up. And he could walk outside and, pan left to right and see the sight of a 30-foot dead humpback whale on the beach. And maybe he'll have second thoughts about that.
Sure. And Stephen, unfortunately, we are all out of time today. So we'll leave it at that. But remember, subscribe to Jersey First TV. Check us out. Check out Elizabeth over at the Nader Narrative and Fernando at Real Talk with Fernando. And all of the work over at Jersey First at jerseyfirst.org. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. Hopefully, there'll be some brighter news next Saturday. But if not, I'm AJ Malillo still.
I'm Stephen Brambolo.
And we hope you have a great one. Have a good one, everyone.